This is the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel. Today is Friday, the 5th of December. My name is Neil Saravanamuttu. I'm joined by Joanne Chianello and John Willing. Hello, and how are you both today?
Hello, hello.
Cold. It's freezing out.
But
Terrible
I'm actually
outside.
beside a giant window, so at least there's some light. But yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But I
Well,
have
this
not
is
left the house. It is true.
this is the holiday season, but of course, the City Hall is also the budget season. And what that means is that all the different committees are going through their budgets right now. And City Council will look at the entire 2026 budget next Wednesday, December the 10th. So today we're going to get started with one of the budgets that was looked at this week, which is the Finance and Corporate Services Committee budget. So we're going to start there. And it's interesting that Finance and Corporate Services covers a wide range of things from information technology to accounting to Service Ottawa, right through to LRT construction. So I want to ask you guys, given the history that you both have, do you understand why LRT construction ever ended up in this committee?
Yes. And that is because LRT is funded by the city as a whole, so it goes through finance. But once we have accepted it and it's running, up and running, then the operations of it goes through OC Transpo. That is my understanding. Now, the only thing I would say is the legal stuff does not. The legal expenses still go through finance. John, what do you think? Is that
Well, yeah,
close?
absolutely. It just happened under, of course, Jim Watts, former Mayor Jim Watson, City Hall. But it was a council decision to appoint the finance committee to oversee the construction. So it wasn't like the city just made the decision. It was a governance decision by council to assign the finance committee, which is made up of traditionally all the chairs of all the committees. So it's always seen as kind of like the cabinet of council. And that's why LRT
And it's chaired by the
construction,
mayor always, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's considered like, kind of the most important committee because they deal with all these big issues, including LRT construction.
Yeah, but to be honest, I mean, I think that's the reason that you just mentioned is why this is being done through finance committee. Because all other construction projects or most other construction projects are just done within the committee where they reside, right?
Well,
Um,
it lands down again. I think it was a reason to have the really big ticket items come through this more powerful committee that's chaired by the mayor. I'm not saying it's bad. It's actually not bad. As long as it's actually all public, I think that's fine.
yeah.
But I think once it's operational, it goes to the departments that are working with it.
Okay. Okay. So the big item in this budget, this committee's budget, was around LRT construction and some of the additional resources that are being put to that front. So we learned that there's going to be an extra $6.5 million for LRT construction for stage one. Now, the problem is stage one, wasn't that completed 5 years ago in
It has
2019?
been running 6 years. It has been running since September of 2019. Well, more or less running, yes, but lately mostly running.
So why? So can either of you? Why do we have $6.5 million in construction costs for LRT one?
Yeah. So as I was alluding to earlier, because I knew we were going to talk about this, sure, the construction costs go to the finance committee, but also legal costs. So this is all about legal disputes that are out of the construction of the LRT one, right? And so it's the delays and the maybe some of the sinkhole things. We don't know. All the stuff is being talked about in secret, but the lawyers have been doing a good job both of not talking about this publicly, but also getting a lot more money. John, I found one of your old stories from 2021 where the city asked for $15 million more for legal fees. This time around, we're up to, I think it's $5 million. I think $1.5 million is for, I'm not sure what exactly, some little thing, but most of this money is for legal fees, which is unbelievable that we actually don't even know what the disputes are about.
Yeah. So legal fees, but can I ask, and maybe John, maybe I'll ask you this: Do we know? Do we have any idea of how much the city actually had to settle on legal disputes for phase one for stage one?
No, everything's been kind of like hush hush. And back to like the stage one and the $6.5 million. Yeah, Joanne's right. Like legal stuff, engineering. I remember what was referenced at committee, but also they talked about the axle bearing issue on the trains too, was lumped into that. So that's an issue we haven't really got a resolution for. Just a quick recall on that, right? When we had the derailments, there was we're trying to figure out how that happened, and it was pinpointed back to the axle bearing issue in the trains. And then there was a bit of dispute between RTG and Alstom. The city is kind of wrapped in about whose fault this is. So we don't have really a resolution on that. I'm curious to know why we're spending more money on that. Why is it seemingly our problem too as a city? Isn't this a RTG Alstom issue? But it comes back to the planning, I guess, and design. So I don't know. So back to your point, Neil, we don't know how much money in terms of all these lawsuits and legal costs. We don't know what it amounts to right now, or what the resolution on any of those claims have really been.
But I actually think that of that 6.5 million, because we're talking about 156 million dollars that they're asking for in this budget that came out of nowhere. I think they said of the 6.5 million, like 5 million was for legal fees. So I think it's for, they keep having these in-camera discussions about the ongoing negotiations between the city and RTG for stage one, whatever those may be. No one will talk about it. I understand it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know. I think it's the lawyers who are continuing along with that. I think that's what the most of that little part of the money is for an LRT that's been open for 6 years.
Okay.
So.
Well, Joanne, I just want to pick up on a number you mentioned there, 156 million. So this budget is asking for an additional $156 million in spending on LRT construction. Now, 6.5 of that is for stage one, as we just discussed. The rest is for stage two. Now, remember, stage two is the extension out east and out west and out south. And so we've seen the south line come on stream. We are hoping that the eastern line is going to come on stream early next year, and then the western extension will come online sometime in the next 2027,
I think.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we're talking about $150 million more for stage two. So can either of you break down how we come up with that number and what that's all about?
Well, okay, you had to listen to the report, and I'm glad that Councillor Jeff Leeper asked about it, because it is written nowhere that I can find. There's no report comes to staff. I don't know why we disbanded the LRT subcommittee. Obviously, there's lots to report about it, or at least on occasion, there's something to report about it. And when you look at the finance budget, there's not like an asterisk beside the 3 lines that show this $156 million that might go to a note that explains what it's for. So, Troy Charter, he's the acting general manager at OC Transpo right now. We still don't have a permanent GM, nor have I heard of how they're trying to recruit one, by the way, but that's another issue. Now, he said there's about 70 million is needed for those extended project deadlines. So it's like, as you mentioned, line 2, the Trillium line, and line 4, which is the spur to the airport, they've been open for some time now, right? So the fact that there were extra costs because of the extended deadline, because, when things run late, it's not just costs on the builder, it's cost on the city, because they have more staff and their lawyers and their consultants and their engineering consultants, right? They have to be kept on longer. So all of that extension on lines 2 and 4, that cost about $70 million, that extended deadline. Now, I have to say, we call that contingency. Personally, I call that cost overrun, but okay. I mean, if we're still paying for money for something that's been built and finished and operating, like from last year, I don't see how that's still contingency, but that's fine. And then the other $80 million is to deal with things that maybe were not previously anticipated, like they were using some trains that they were supposed to be using in the East End. They've had to move them over to the West End to try to test the tracks there. Nobody picked up on that line. I have to wonder, does that mean we don't have enough working trains? Like, what is that all about? Like, there's a lot of little things that Troy Charter said that I'd like to have a 20-minute conversation about just that one line. So it was like risks, because there was like soil contamination and they didn't realize how serious it was. And I'm just looking over at my notes here. New fencing and safety considerations and noise mitigation measures. Like, basically, there's a lot of stuff we didn't think about that somehow we need $80 million for. One thing that really jumped out at me is that the city and SNC-Lavalin, which built the Trillium line, which we gave them a contract for, even though they failed the technical score twice and probably should have been thrown out. That's who built it for us. They are apparently in a fight with us, the city, on how to share the costs of the bridge overpass that goes over the Via Rail line. Now, I have to ask, why? Like, is that not in the contract? Like, did it not say who was going to pay for that? So there's like, and I know I'm going on a bit. This is where I live, man, in LRT details. But it raises so many questions of how this project is being overseen and, what is happening there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, John, I'd like you to pick up on a point that Joanne made, was the fact that we only found out these details from listening to the committee discussion. So there's everyone that's in the room, the 30, 40 people in the room, the three of us, and then the other 55 people that actually listen to this stream. Like we're the only ones that know these details, right? And even we only know the details because a counselor asked them. Why is this stuff not being reported out proactively?
Well, I don't know. That's not chump change, right? $150 million. So you expect almost a separate report on to what Joanna's saying. It's not contingencies anymore. It's just add-ons essentially.
Yeah.
So when I hear stuff like, "Oh, we realize we need new security fencing. We need more noise mitigation stuff." This isn't contingencies anymore. This is add-on stuff to the project. The soil contamination was really interesting. So in that regard, Troy Charter was saying there are, as Joanne said, much higher volumes, and the disposal fees come with that. So we didn't know how much contaminated soil there was. So it speaks to you really have to make sure your planning's on the mark when you're starting to build a big LRT system like that. But the one thing that stuck out for me, guys, on the topic of contingencies was that this is going to be one of a series of asks, because we heard in the next budget after this one, there's going to be another, quote, contingency ask of about $36 million for 27-28. So we're not done yet. So I don't know what the $36 million is going to be for in two budgets for now. But if you're a council member, I hope you're writing that down, or someone coming into council perhaps, and remembering to ask about that. What's in the 36 mil?
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Okay.
I find, to your point, Neil, I'm sorry, I want to just add on. It is shocking that that's not reported out. Like the last time they got an update, it was in 2023. They said, we're probably going to come forward with a contingency ask. Again, I don't know the use of the word contingency here, but with an ask of $53 million. Instead, the ask was $156 million, an extra $100 million, that the only reason there was any evidence of it is, my props to Arthur White Crummy over at CBC, who wrote a story. He's like, what are these three lines here in this finance budget, right? Mm-hmm. So I find that really questionable.
Yeah. And the other thing that I don't think you mentioned, Joanne, that in that $80 million of new expenses, these cost overruns, I believe part of that includes potential legal claims in the future too. So, already provisioning for future claims. So, and it's unfortunate. I do want to ask you about going in camera, because we seem to be going in camera as a council an awful lot to address different issues, and we're going to cover one or two of them later today. But I wanted to ask, from your experience, is this council going in camera more often than previous councils?
100%. Yes, way more often. I mean, I was laughing, and this might be an exaggeration, but it seems like there are more council meetings with an in-camera session than there are without one. Now, part of that, I have to say, what came out of the LRT inquiry, where Justice Horrigan said, the city should make a better effort to keep council members up to date on what's happening and get these updates. I'm not sure he said they should be in camera, all of them, right? So there's, a line in the Municipal Act that allows council to go in camera to discuss legal issues, or if there's any, litigation implications. I would like to say that's not mandatory. You can decide to speak publicly. I remember when the North-South line was canceled, and council was going to get an update as to what it would cost to cancel that contract. They had an argument, and they decided that they would discuss that in public. And you know what? I don't think it changed the outcome of that in any way, right? And so here, I'm not saying that council should be discussing their legal strategies in public, right? We saw they went in camera for a cybersecurity update. Of course, that should be secret. But the idea that we actually, the three of us who pay way too much attention to this stuff than normal people should, that we can't even figure out which are the disputes that are outstanding and who's arguing what for whom, and we're the ones paying for it, and we don't know. That is not. It's really not acceptable. And I'm really surprised that there hasn't been more pushback on that.
Well, I would say even on issues like cybersecurity, I agree. It's really sensitive information. But hopefully the city finds a way to report a little bit about what maybe taxpayers and the citizens need to know about how safe their information is in the hands of City Hall.
Mhm.
And this is, and you know, with the legal stuff going on camera, this is the problems when you have spicy legal files. And the LRT file is going to be like, I think it's going to go on forever in terms of the legal disputes with RTG and whoever else. You know, I don't think it was reported on the news, not that it was newsy, but I know that City and RTG are in the courts right now about disclosure. And I think there's a deadline coming up in this month about disclosing documents. Some of it has to do with the Ashwood that was supposed to be used for stations. And there's millions and millions of dollars in claims, I think countersuits and everything else. So that's an issue that was years ago. So I'm like looking ahead 10 years. We see stage 2 is delayed. You know, I don't know when that Western extension is going to open. I hope it's going to be in a couple of years. But I think we're on a long train, on a long rail of legal claims from stage 1, as we just talked about at the top, but going forward for stage 2 for years to come too.
Yeah.
And although that sometimes is expected in a huge project like this, as people tell you this is always what happens, there's get it done and then figure out the money later. That doesn't mean it should be secret, though. I mean, even if it's complex and long, right? And we shouldn't enter into agreements that, like, staff and our lawyers should not enter into agreements, at least not without council's explicit permission, into agreements that actually like ties their hands into saying anything publicly. That's not their jobs. Council's job is to represent their residents, but also to inform them of, you know, what's happening.
Last question or last thought I wanted to leave with you about going in camera is it like, is there not more of an onus maybe on councillors to be pushing back here saying, look, we should really be discussing this publicly? I don't see that happening. I mean, should councillors be asking for that?
I think they should be pushing for as much information as possible that won't jeopardize their legal disputes. So the problem with this is, as soon as something gets spicy and you start revealing the city's strategy in court, then everyone's going to want to go on camera pretty quickly. And if I was a council member, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't want to be the one that jeopardizes your case in court because too much information goes into the hands of the enemy. At the same time, you are a public organization with a duty to work for the citizens and provide information. And that's the thing they have to reconcile. But I would hope the city, the staff, and through council provides as much information as possible. I'm not quite sure if we're getting that right now, guys, but I would hope they provide as much information as possible without going down, you know, some tricky paths where you reveal the strategy or what they would ask for in front of a judge one day.
Okay.
I am actually, just to your point quickly, Neil, I am also surprised to not see councillors pushing back more. I don't know what they say in camera. I don't know what kind of, I don't want to say threats, but you know, what they're told might happen if they speak out loud. But I'm shocked to hear, like, I think Jeff Leeper this week said very briefly, well, I'm uncomfortable going in camera about this. This is on another item on Atasoke. And that was it. Like, that's not enough.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask one last question about LRT2. So now we're hearing that stage 2 it was a $4.7 billion budget initially in 2019. So $4.7 billion. We're now looking at cost overruns of about 500 million. So about 10, 11%, somewhere in that range. I want to ask both of you, if we can just step back and say, you know, if you reflect on the LRT over the last number of years, what is like a key learning that you would take from this as we go through it once again?
For me, it's like the Big Brother like show, Expect the Unexpected or something like that. You know, you have no idea what you're getting into with a massive infrastructure project like this, but you really have to set realistic contingencies, make sure your planning is like pretty like iron shut as best as you can. You know, it strikes me when you have extra spending being requested like this, council is sort of powerless in the moment. At the time, it's like, what are you going to say? No? Like, yeah, we need the security fence. Yeah, we need to tip the soil, contaminated soil at the dump. It has to swallow the spending right now and maybe make it back through the courts. There's no alternative. So it's like, you know, we can be critical of lawyers who are like making a lot of money off the city, but then it's like we need the lawyers. Help us, lawyers. You're our only hope to get money back, maybe at some point too. But with
well,
this
maybe
type
they
of
could
project,
help us
it's
at
really
the front
tricky.
end too. Sorry, John, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think also we need the lawyers to help us at the front end, right? Like, yeah, afterwards, of course you're stuck. That's why all these projects go over. Everybody gets a price that they think they can sell politically. And then later we're like, well, it's too late. We got to actually pay all this extra money. So those early prices, Neil, I know you talked about this a lot on Lansdowne. They're just, magical thinking prices, right? Because this is what happens. And it happens in every single project. Now, at the LRT, it's just massive. And it's amazing. I think the public has just like discounted that it's going to be way over budget, because these are hundreds of millions of dollars we're talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars. And my question is who's accountable for this? Like, who signed this deal that lets this happen? And I don't know if there's really going to ever be an answer to that. I mean, most of the people are gone, but I mean, to the point I made earlier about like, we don't even know who's responsible for paying for the Via Rail overrun. I hope that's the dog. Hey,
I thought Neil's out of here. He doesn't like this.
Awesome. He's like, I don't want to hear about that bridge again. No. So, I think, and I wish we would learn this lesson, but I don't think we do. And that is, let's be realistic about what the contingency fees, what the contingency is. 10%. It's not going to do it on a huge project. And also, how much are we pretending that everything's going to go perfectly? Now, LRT2 did have the COVID pandemic in the middle of it, which, that was actually very unexpected, but, it happens with lots of other projects that do not have a pandemic in the middle of them.
Yeah. So, what my big takeaway has been watching this is that cities need to be very careful entering into public-private partnerships, and cities need to be very strong and capable in order to be able to implement them effectively. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing is that the city of Ottawa just doesn't have, I'm not seeing the capacity within the city of Ottawa to effectively manage with a private partner. These are supposed to be all about risk transfer, that we transfer the commercial and project risk off the city and onto the private partner. Yeah, what we're seeing over and over again with all of our different projects is that we just take all that risk right back onto ourselves, and just so there's an imbalance between what the public sector and what the private sector are taking on, and by corollary, who's benefiting. So that's
lawyers.
Unfortunate. Well, lawyers, sure, and I think in a lot of cases the private partner too. So that's kind of my takeaway, that PPPs have just not been working well in the city of Ottawa, and maybe we need to be looking at another model. Can I ask the two of you, there was one other remark that came up in the committee meeting, and that was around the long-range financial plan. Now, the three of us have been discussing this for a number of weeks now, the fact that we've got this massive $11 billion infrastructure deficit, and we haven't come up with a plan for how we're going to address the tax side of it. That works out to about $7 billion, if I remember correctly. Now, what I've speculated is that I was always worried that this would get pushed out to 2027, even though we were supposed to have done it 6 months ago, and we failed to meet that provincial deadline. What we did hear, and I was very pleased to hear this, was that the mayor came out and said, we will be reporting on the long-range financial plan for tax early in the new year, so first quarter of 2026. So I just wanted to make a quick point, and then a question for the two of you. The first point is, remember last week we had that discussion about what is the utility of delegating for people? And I think this is a perfect example where a number of people have been agitating on this point. So, like we've talked about it a lot, but a lot of delegates have come to City Council, including to Finance Committee this week, to say, where's your long-range financial plan on tax? And so clearly the mayor and the city felt compelled to respond to that and to address that. And so it is coming back in early in the new year. So that's great. Just public pressure works. But point number two is, I have to ask the two of you, do you think this is a smart political move for the mayor? I mean, we're going into an election year in 2026. And, if you look at Toronto, they addressed this issue in 2024. So they took their, it's painful, right? They went through they had to go through a large tax increase in 2024 and again in 2025. But perhaps by 2026, it'll be much less talked about. So this, as far as I can see, has the mayor not set himself up for like a discussion going into the election that is all about how much are we going to have to increase taxes in the years to come?
Yeah, I think part of it is, so I'm hearing that the upload of the Highway 174 is going relatively well, but I mean, it's still not expected to be happening in 2027. So maybe they can build that in. And I think they were waiting to hope that the LRT upload was going to give them some wiggle room, but that's going to take years. It's super complicated, right? If that happens, I hope it does happen. Politically, very weird timing because it can only cost us a lot of money. Borrowing, taxes, whatever. The only thing I wonder is if Mayor Sutcliffe is setting this up for sort of a campaign promise of a, infrastructure levy, for example, to say, look, we've shown here, we've inherited all of these, structural deficits on our assets. We need to catch up. And so maybe he's setting it up for then, because yeah, I'm with you, Neil. Usually you would have the bad news, you get your 9% tax increase year one and down to 3% by year four, right before the election. So I do wonder if, because I don't know otherwise what he would do with that, unless you're saying you're going to borrow it all and can't borrow all of it, right? Because some of it you're going to have to, pay back and you have other services to provide for the city. So yeah, that's the only thing I can see is that you're setting up the base argument for an infrastructure levy in the next term. I don't know.
Well, the last long-range financial plan, I think, guys, was passed in 2017. So that was a year before the municipal elections, probably by design. So to your point, Neil, yeah, it's politically risky by having a big, what is how do we raise money and pay for things plan. But it's the first quarter. If Mayor Sutcliffe is right that it's coming in the first quarter, there's going to be a long time between March and October election for that to pass over too. And it's not something you really go to the doors, right? Really necessarily campaign on, unless there's a huge pipe break and that goes front of mind for voters. So I think there's enough time between March and April for this thing just to kind of come and go, and then we move into campaign mode with maybe more sexy things. Not that it's not sexy; it's sexy for us, but I mean, in the citizenry, there might be other sexy things happening.
Yeah, I guess it depends what it says, right? Will it say we need to raise taxes by X amount every time? Maybe it won't say that.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Neil?
Well, I mean, I think there's three options here, right? We can raise taxes, we can take on more debt, or the third option, which was, if I remember back to the committee discussion 6 months ago, they were referred to as choices about which facilities we want to keep going. Okay, so I think there's a risk that there might be some facilities that are closed or sold off that is would be extremely politically challenging, right? If you lose a community center in your neighborhood,
that would be crazy for that for 2026, that option. I mean, I hear you on that, but I mean, those are going to be. If that actually would happen, those ward arguments, those ward elections would be really challenging and really spicy, as to use John's favorite word.
Unless you're proposing to replace with something better, So you're right, you guys. There's a lot of arenas, rec facilities that are aging out. Even we talk about Lansdowne, and we can have an argument or a debate about whether the Civic Center is any good anymore. But those vintage type of arenas, and so we have to decide whether we're going to repair or do something a little bit better and maybe more new. And
but replacing them is going to be even more. Yeah, sorry, but replacing them is going to be even more expensive, right? So unless it just takes it off one ledger and puts it onto a different ledger, I don't know.
Oh.
Another item that was discussed at the Finance Committee was the status of the central branch of the library at Asoke that's being built right now. And we found out that project will not open in 2026 as originally, as promised, not originally promised, but as promised at one point. So either of you, can you tell us what's going on here? And is this just delays, expected with any large project?
Well, Neil, we can't tell you what's going on because you'll be shocked to hear that they went in camera to discuss it. We got a hint in June where the lead of the project, Karina Duclos, said we're having some, red alerts that the scheduling might be off. When they're asked, okay, what's going on? What is the problem? She's like, I can't really tell you. And then indeed, this week we heard for sure it's being delayed. It's not opening 2026. At this point, it actually is taking longer to build the library than it did to build stage 1 LRT. it looks like it's going to be beautiful. There's obviously some issues with some contractors that there might be a legal dispute, but that is no reason to go in camera, but they did. So we actually don't know what's causing the delays, to our earlier discussion earlier in the program about the amount this council goes in camera.
Yeah,
It
John,
seems inappropriate.
do you have any further insights?
Well, I just would say, like, this is a pretty exciting project, and I've called it the super library, but like hearing the news this week was like a super bummer, because I think we're all looking forward to the facility being open in 2026. It was supposed to, remember, guys, be open at the end of 2024. But now, as Joanne said, the extension to the timeline is pretty long, and we have no idea. Something must be going on. Someone, guys, must be getting suey inside this partnership. The construction designers, I don't know. But it's a real shame.
Big deal. That always happens. They can't just tell us that. Just we're having some legal problems with this people, but whatever. This is what's happening.
I think like over the past 6 months, guys, like we got to see, like this is one of the few projects where you see it being built and it looks like the rendering. And so I think a lot of people got excited about it because it looks pretty spectacular, right? Even if it's only like half done or something. So I think it's just a real shame that this is going to be delayed, and that sounds like our LRT discussion, looks to be possibly another conflict within the construction process.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I just assumed this was kind of delays as normal, as expected with any large project. But then during the presentation, the city staff said they had a line which they said, and I'm just going to quote here: "This project is not in jeopardy."
Yeah, no one asked that. Yeah.
I hear that, I'm like, oh my, like Richard Nixon saying, I am not.
I had not really anticipated that, but glad to hear, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. So that really worried me. That is there something more structural going on here, right? Like, is there worries about the quality of the constructions? I wonder if there's something like that happening.
Well, I was wondering that too. I was wondering, can the design be constructed? Is the first thing I wondered. And this is kind of like, there's a lot of credibility here for City Hall. It's partnered with the federal government to build this thing, right? Library and Archives Canada has a lot of skin in the game too. So the city really has to deliver, and it's really a shame to hear that they're running into problems right now getting it done.
Yeah. And so what we heard was that this it will not open in 2026, but there's a hope that it will open in 2027. Probably they didn't give us a date, but hopefully early 2027. Because I'm with you, John, and Joanne, I'm sure you're the same. That this is looking absolutely fantastic, as you say, looking like what we were promised, which is a beautiful building. Can't wait for it to open. It could be a really revolutionary space, particularly for west of downtown. And
it looks so close to being done. They keep giving us photos, and you're like, really? You can't get it done in a year? No? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's turn to one last subject, and that was late in the week. So on Thursday, the mayor held a press conference to talk about public safety. Now he was joined by the chiefs of police and paramedics and fire. He was also joined by two of the executive directors of the community health centers of Centertown and West Somerset, and it was talk about public safety and some of the measures that were in the budget. So we knew that there was a big increase to the police budget. We knew that there was additional money to hire more paramedics and some money for new fire equipment. There was also $700,000 to expand the Anchor program. So just a reminder that Anchor is the non-police response for mental health calls that is currently being done out of the Centertown Community Health Center. And I just, as an aside, I'm a board member of this of the Centertown Community Health Center. And it is being expanded west, so as far west as Island Park Drive, covering largely the Somerset West Community Health Center's zone of coverage. That's why those two executive directors were there. But we did hear one surprise, something that no one had heard before, which is that the mayor announced there will be an additional $1 million allocated for the Byward Market over 2 years, so $500,000 a year. And the purpose will be to hire private security guards. So I wanted to ask the two of you, first of all, were you surprised that this all came out through a press release, and particularly that last piece about the private security guards, which no one had heard before, or a press event, I should say? And number two, the issue of Byward Market security, is private security the way to go?
Well,
I'll start. Okay, you start.
Okay. Well, I find it just fascinating. Like, I don't think it's that unique. I think I saw some reporting done by my story that I saw with CTV was that the BIA was actually going to run the security program. And the way that this is going to be paid is through the municipal accommodations tax, right? That nice pot of money that tourists pay to stay in hotel rooms and Airbnbs. So thank you, tourists, once again. But it's interesting because you see the depolicing of some of the what you think would be traditionally police roles in our city. We talked about this in the last pod, the idea of using more special constables in places where you possibly can, traffic enforcement, this kind of thing. So it's interesting that they found another opportunity to use civilians to keep their eyes on the street. And actually, there's been a trend across Canada of using more private security in places, not necessarily in tourist areas, but like just in general, in terms of not using like rank and file policing, but choosing a different option that might be cheaper. And it made me wonder like what the police union thinks about this. But I think it's going to be interesting because people's expectations have to be managed. It's not like private security can arrest people. I think they can make citizens arrests like anyone else can, but they're not like police who can detain. And so they're just another set of eyes on the street who'll be able to inform police if they see a crime in progress, I guess.
Yeah, to me, this was a campaign announcement, which is fine. Like in that, when you're the mayor, you get to campaign every day, right? Like you're the mayor. And I think he was asked something sort of along those lines, and he said, the budget is complex, and it's good to bring all parts of it together. My argument is sure, but it could also be explained properly. Also, that line about using the $500 million a year for the security is not in the budget. All it says is municipal accommodation tax. We're getting an extra $5 or $6 million out of it because it's going up by 1 percentage point next year. Who gets to decide where that money goes? Actually, that's a real question to two of you. Like procedurally, like did council supposed to know? And you heard a couple of councillors, namely Ariel Troster, Jeff Sleeper, saying, we're getting kind of tired of having policies being announced at press conferences, a little bit like Lansdowne. We don't see a report. We don't hear anything about it, right? It gives the businesses a bit of relief, I think, in the Byward market. A lot of them were paying privately for security. I have a visceral reaction to when I hear, we're hiring like security. I think of like the Pinkertons. But, there is research that shows more eyes on the street might deter crime a bit. It's fine. Like as a policy, I guess it's fine. It's not going to be a long-term solution to the problems in the Byward market, which we're going to have to do, a lot more social programming around that, supportive housing, addiction services, all the things. But as an announcement, like, and procedurally, I think we're going to see more of that kind of thing in the next year, let's just say.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. There's your point, Joanne, about more eyes on the street, for sure. That always improves public safety. But the thing that we need to understand here is that, and to John's point about the limits of what a private security operator can actually do, what I worry about is all this will achieve is just push the problems that we see on the streets of the Byward market, just push them to another part of town too. We've seen that already with the increased police presence in Byward market, pushing more and more homelessness into Centertown. And I just think we're going to continue that trend. So it's paying Peter, what is it? Robbing Peter to pay Paul, right?
Yeah,
okay, great. That is the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel for this week. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd like to thank Joanne and John for their insights. And we will be back in a week's time. We will see you all then. Thank you.